Is Tucker Kraft for real? That more this week on the couch, joined by Alan Seslowsky. Alan, Tucker Kraft, is he the answer to our tight end woes?
Yeah, there's always one tight end that doesn't get drafted or outside the top 15 that ends up being one of the right answers. If you look back, it happens every single year. And usually it happens on as just some ancillary piece of a good offense that we liked. And all the signs were there with Tucker Kraft, right?
Yeah.
Sigmund Bloom?
Yeah.
For me, it was when they were giving him the 2-point conversion looks, right? Which means that he's a player that they look for when the points matter in the end zone. So last couple weeks, 9 targets, 5 targets, bunch of yards, 88 and 53, bunch of touchdowns, 2-point conversion. He's probably, I'd rather have him than Christian Watson when he's healthy, straight up.
Yeah. I mean, would you trade Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid for Tucker Kraft?
Yeah, if we're redrafting today, George Kittle, Brock Bowers, those guys are going to be the top of the tight end board.
Ferguson.
Travis Kelce. Yeah, Ferguson might even be tight end 1 in something that rewards points per reception premium stuff. And then Travis Kelce's back in our life. If you like Trey McBride, sure, like he still has some upside there. But Tucker Kraft is now where Evan Ingram was being drafted, and maybe higher.
Yeah, and he's in that George Kittle mold in the sense that you might suffer through a 2 for 17 or a 3 for 26, but it's that what's beautiful about Tucker Kraft, and I'm gonna always give a nod to Dane Brugler, because Dane Brugler was on my show, the annual show we do before the draft, and he said, "Hey, Tucker Kraft, Alabama wanted this guy, and he was loyal to his program, and Tucker Kraft is good, and it was a really good tight end class, and he blended in." And how many times, Alan? How many times are we going to see a team draft 2 tight ends in the same draft and the second one's the better tight end? How many times? Isaiah Likely now adding to that list, Tucker Kraft. And it's just in that Kittle, Rob Gronkowski mode of the joyful warrior, the way he plays the game.
I thought you were about to go with Aaron Hernandez. I thought we were going there.
Oh, boy.
Did you see the new show on Hulu, the Aaron Hernandez show?
I haven't seen that. I've seen the Patriots Dynasty show and how it kind of glossed over some stuff. And I'm definitely familiar with the Aaron Hernandez canon. And certainly, wow, we're really like 2.5 minutes in. This is why I have you on this. This is why I have this show. Well, because go ahead. What do you want to add? You go first. What did you want to add bringing up Aaron Hernandez?
Well, you're talking about 2 tight ends get drafted in the same class, and the second one is just as good or better. Obviously, you're not going to get better than Gronk, but when they drafted Aaron Hernandez, and again, obviously, Aaron Hernandez, the person, it's a crazy story, and that's why I said you should watch the show on Hulu. It's actually really good. It's a 10-part series, but sometimes it's like when you're loose, because when you're making one of those premium picks when you're an NFL GM, you're a little tight. You're kind of going just like in your fantasy draft, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I have to take Christian McCaffrey at the 1.1, even though all the signs are pointing not to do it. But when you get into those later rounds in your fantasy draft and in the real NFL draft, you're a little bit looser. Hey, let's shoot for upside.
Right.
And when the upside hits, it's Tucker Kraft. It's Mark Andrews over Hayden Hurst. So you're just drafting a little looser when you go in those later rounds.
Yeah, maybe the second pick is the pick. Maybe the first pick is the pick you have to take, and the second pick is the pick you want to take. And Tucker Kraft, everybody should want to have Tucker Kraft. Any tricks you're thinking at tight end otherwise for people that are rubbing to? Do you think the Mark Andrews resurgence could happen? Could the Kyle Pitts resurgence stick? Is there somebody else lurking? I don't know, Tyler Conklin, something, anything, any other tight end advice before we turn the page on that position?
Yeah, well, we learned a lesson last week because should I drop Kyle Pitts? And then people actually did it last week where they benched him, right? I had a bunch of Kyle Pitts on my bench with the 20 points in premium leagues. So we learned that you don't do that, right? That's a bad play because the roulette's always going to land on green when you bet black or red. It just that's how it goes.
Right.
So we're with Mark Andrews, the same thing. You're playing him right now. It's a little bit different there because there's multiple tight ends that are all getting targets, but you're never dropping these guys because who are you dropping them for? Kate Otten? Fine.
Right.
Here's your 7 PPR points. But so if you're just like looking for right answers at tight end, you're just kind of following the targets or the matchups. But man, do you ever regret taking Sam Laporta, and even any of these guys? Kincaid, it was all set up for him. So, yeah, what's the answer? The answer was you took the most boring pick of all. You mentioned him earlier. Jake Ferguson was the right pick at tight end because you got him at the right price, and he's a set it and forget it the rest of the way.
Yeah, aligning with the very pass-heavy Cowboys. Maybe Jalen Tolbert's coming on as a third option, but we know there wasn't any established second option among the wide receivers, especially once Brandon Cook's knee. That knee precursor, boy, one of the big lessons of this year, Alan, has been pay attention to injury news, especially for players on the back nine of their career. Pay attention to that injury news during the preseason, and we shouldn't take teams' word for anything. Like we just in the preseason and camp, just don't take their word for anything, because Brandon Cooks goes from that was one of those ones that escalated. He had to have a procedure after the game. Oh, to avoid meniscus surgery. What? And then it got infected. Oh, come on. Not that Brandon Cooks was doing too much, but and Jalen Tolbert was already a full-time player, but that's what it took facing the Steelers to come alive. Go ahead.
Yeah, just sometimes we got to have an injury to the incumbent to see what the upstart guy could do. I mean, Tolbert was just sitting there for many years. It happens all the time, right? I mean, there's tons of examples where, the Keenan Allen types are just, sitting there and Roma Dunze or whoever it is won't get, fully plugged in until that guy is out of the way. And you're never going to push a Keenan Allen out of the way. You're never going to push a Brandon Cooks out of the way,
right?
Until it happens to the team.
Yeah. Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Smith and Jigba's getting the snaps, but not the consistent fantasy output. Let's talk other news today. Nico Collins, injured reserve. Oh my gosh. What an innocuous looking thing. It's 67-yard touchdown. And then he's like, well, I got to get this checked out. Now it's out for 4 games. Any shark moves here? Any reactions immediately of how you can take advantage of this? Or maybe is the real reaction just the pie is going to get smaller for Houston?
Yeah, if you were anti-Nico in the second round, and there was people saying that, and you weren't wrong. You were just skeptical. You weren't anti, don't take him in the second round. It was that he does get hurt. He's been hurt before. He hasn't done it before. I don't want to take him at the price where he's going to do it. Now, if you drafted Nico Collins, you're happy because he was going to be a first-round pick if we restarted our leagues today. Houston's playing super slow, right? They're using that whole play clock. They're punting when they're on the opposite, on the close to the 50-yard line instead of going for it at times or kicking a long field goal. So Stephon Diggs currently wide receiver 9. I mean, that's going to pay off for you over the next month, right? Like he's going to be one of the right answers. And then you're just hoping that Tank Dell gets back into the mix and looks a little bit like he did last year. I think, and they're going to run the ball more than you want them to. So yeah, I mean, the bad pick that everyone told you was Stephon Diggs is going to end up paying off for at least the next month.
Yeah, he's reliable. He's not the downfield receiver he was earlier in his career, but like you said, in a more conservative approach, hey, all they have to do is just make the layups, make the game, win the games they're supposed to win, and they'll probably win the division, host a playoff game, and then see what goes from there. As the Texans again trade the key to the Texans' future, trading away Deshaun Watson, right? Isn't that interesting how all works out?
You put out a great tweet, and I just want to amplify it for you. I want to that you said, look at the teams that traded away the superstar in the obvious post-peak era, the Russell Wilson,
right,
Deshaun Watson, and Aaron Rodgers. Now look at, again, we don't know what the future holds, but look where the teams are that traded them away. This is your tweet, and look where the teams are now, and say, maybe you should think about this before you go forward. Now Matt Stafford's the obvious exception the other way, and it's an eye-opener. It reminds me of what the New York Knicks used to do, trading for these post-peak stars, right? The Allen Houston type. So
quarterback desperation. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I mean, unless you're Joe Flacco, you just don't get better like when you're 38 years old, right? And Tom Brady, Joe Flacco, the elites.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, hey, Joe Flacco, another tweet I put out there was not going to make the Hall of Fame, shouldn't at least. But one of the most memorable careers, like a la Ryan Fitzpatrick, but with higher peaks than Ryan Fitzpatrick, just an extremely memorable quarterback. And I that's close to my heart because I remember as a kid saying, I don't care if I'm one of the first names that scroll by in the credits after the movie. I just want to be one of the characters that people remember and hopefully remember with a positive. And I think we should remember Joe Flacco positively. Real quick on the Nico Collins thing, I'll just put this out there because one of my favorite things to do, then one of the most underrated things to do for fantasy football, as we're going through the bye week gauntlet, we're doing that end of the roster churn, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes because, okay, we're past the bye now. Of key players, we can drop some players maybe that we just had for depth. Xavier Hutchinson. Remember that name. He replaced Collins and had 2 for 31. A Matt Waldman favorite. You should always pay attention when it's a Matt Waldman favorite. And he's going to be the one with the best matchups. He's going to be the one that Tank Dell looks like maybe 90% of Tank Dell right now, which is still a good player. And Stephon Diggs, not a downfield threat at this point. Xavier Hutchinson, interesting guy. You fill in your end of the roster with young players. They're going to have some sort of reveal. We don't know. Mystery boxes. Who doesn't like mystery boxes? Well, the Jets. We talked about Joe Flacco. Let's turn the page and let's just talk Jets. Let's go to sports talk radio. And I'll set it up like this because the transitions from Joe Flacco, because the reviving the franchise Joe Flacco did not revive the Jets. Revived the Browns. Now a little glimpse of it with the Colts. What I said about the Robert Saleh firing was, it's not you, it's us. But we can there's layers to this. I mean, obviously, this is fantasy oriented show. We can talk about fantasy or what potentially we could do for fantasy. But also, I think this is just one of those times that maybe without meaning to, the veil gets pulled back a little bit and we see a little bit more of how the NFL actually functions, or what actually turns the crank when things happen.
Yeah, the efficacy. By the way, Xavier Hutchinson, just to put a footnote on there, his best comparable on player profile was like Romeo Dobbs. That's a good player right there.
Yeah.
So I always love when you're doing your, I listen to all your shows, right? So I always like when you're just talking redraft and you just like put like a little footnote and say, hey, deep dynasty leagues, and it's like, you do pull these little deep dynasty gems out. So that's a good name to underline, highlight.
Yeah.
Efficacy of the Robert Saleh firing is that, I'm a Jet fan, lifelong Jet fan, but again, just thinking fantasy wise, real football wise here, there was no reason for them not to have brought in Mike Vrabel in the beginning of the year. Okay, you didn't do it. You wanted to give Saleh a fair chance with Aaron Rodgers, with everything else. But if you look back, it's been well documented of Saleh's. He's a failed version of what they wanted Dan Campbell is, right?
Right. And the Saleh from Dearborn, I thought the Lions were going to make that alignment there, that full alignment. And who knows if Saleh gets hired, what the story is, and if Dan Campbell gets hired, what the Jets, the story is. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the Jets, if you look back historically, you talked about how Flacco, the only place he couldn't prosper was in the Jets. Do you remember what was the last time the Jets had a top 5 offense? What coach was it?
Oh my gosh. I don't even know.
Bill Parcells in 98.
Wow.
Okay. So since the year 2000, Sig, the Jets have, when you add up their points per game, and again, this is across many coaches. This is in the Woody Johnson era. He bought the team in 2000. They have 19 points per game. That's 31st in the NFL. All right. So there is, you can't, like you were saying, when you compare eras, this is a Woody Johnson era. So there's something going on. There's rotten in this era, Sigmund Bloom.
Yeah. And the way you say it, it sounds like you're saying error, which is probably more appropriate, right?
That's my Long Island obnoxious accent.
Yeah, no. Hey, but it works. It's brilliance, because I think that one of the things, and we can also, speaking of Deshaun Watson, we can look at Cleveland also, and you just think, ownership doesn't just matter. Ownership sets the tone. Or in Carolina also, ownership. Nothing else can overcome ownership when it's bad ownership. I think that's what we're seeing, and it was expressed in the quarterback position. And what I like to say is, quarterback desperation is a hell of a drug, because you see how and something I said with Pat Doherty, and I put it out there on Twitter again, just because you see sometimes the NFL is just reduced to being a board game for billionaires, and it's really sad whenever we root for teams because of love. We root for teams because we love our communities, because we love our families, because we love our friends,
nostalgia.
Right. It's a way to be close to your departed loved ones when you shared that. It's a way to have these great shared experiences with people, positive and negative, even whenever it's misery, right? Are you a Mets fan too, by the way?
Yep. So my
Jets, Mets, Islanders.
You got it. So the whole New York line of division.
Nets
right?
too.
Yes, because the reason is in the Nets, and I don't want to deviate too far here, is that when you grew up in Long Island, New York, and those who listen to you from Long Island will know this, is that you didn't get MSG Network with basic cable, you got Sports Channel, which had the Nets on it, not the Knicks.
Right. Yes, and I always heard it as Long Island.
Yeah, you got it right.
And what I learned is every place on Long Island is 20 minutes away from every other place on Long Island.
Except for the city, as they call it. They call Manhattan the city.
I still do that too because I went to Syracuse. I still call
Right.
it the city, and it kind of makes sense. And it's not necessarily a positive or negative thing. Certainly, when you get into some of the different inferiority complexes along the Eastern Seaboard and even Chicago in there, the city, it kind of encapsulates that. But yeah, the Jets and the whole idea of the ownership and how you can just throw these resources, firings will continue until morale improves and things like that. And
do you think it does anything? Do you think the Saleh firing makes them better, makes them worse?
Not at all. No,
Right.
all it does is, so here's what I think it stands for from the outside looking in, is that when you bring in Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career, no other force or influence in the organization can be stronger than Aaron Rodgers. And if there is a force that is attempting to rival Aaron Rodgers in terms of influence over the team, they got to go. Saleh had to go, because the defense is not the problem. And I even think the team culture, I think Robert Saleh did a pretty good job considering what he inherited and considering how the revolving door of players and Joe Douglas's drafts have gone, making this team competitive and having an ethos that they brought every week, even through the Zach Wilson stuff. This team was still often a tough out, and I think you're going to see Robert Saleh follow in the footsteps of Dan Campbell. Actually, the parallel is going to be Brian Flores. I think.
There you go.
And I think you're probably going to see Saleh go back to San Francisco next year, and you're going to end up seeing San Francisco get a second comp pick for this. It's just, this is how it goes in the NFL. Good organizations get richer, and bad organizations stay farther behind. Now, from a fantasy standpoint, is there anything interesting with the idea that now, again, no one is in Aaron Rodgers' way? Aaron Rodgers is going to have complete control. Is that good or bad? Is there anything we can do to take advantage of that?
Well, we're going to need to see what happens with this Davante Adams trade. So the Jets don't have a second-round pick, right? That's Green Bay's, I believe. I think so. But they have 2 third-round picks. So it's either they're going to be able to spend both of these third-rounders and get Davante Adams. Who knows if Mike Williams will end up going to the Raiders in that trade. That's what the money, the cap stuff would have to be figured out. So if they get Davante Adams, even in this stage of his career, coming off a couple-week hamstring, I think that does change everything, right? Because now you have, imagine all those Lazard drops in the end zone or near the end zone or touchdowns, because those would be Davante Adams targets, presumably, right? So now the Jets in this world are 4-1 and not 2-3. So Davante Adams is probably worth at least a win going forward. So if you were going to be, what do they call it, 8-9 now or 9-8, that makes you 10-7. And in the NFC East, yes, I think that does change the trajectory. So if they're going to do all this, why not do it now, right? Like, why is Davante Adams still on the Raiders? So fantasy wise also, but it's so obvious. The biggest problem with the Jets for fantasy is that you spent the top 5 pick on Breece Hall. You probably didn't, you're not going to get your money back. They have their own version of Tyler Algier on their roster with Braylon Allen. So, if we redrafted today, would Breece Hall be a first-round pick?
Third-round pick, fourth-round pick? Just off the top of my head, here, I'm just going to do, this is a fun exercise, right? Let me pull up my handy-dandy list here, right? So here are the running backs that I would take ahead of Breece Hall today. Devin Achane, Aaron Jones is tough. Kyron Williams, obviously. James Cook, probably still Jonathan Taylor, even with the injury.
Saquon.
Derrick Henry.
Lions running backs?
Both Lions running backs. Like J.K. Dobbins, I think you're like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about J.K. Dobbins versus Breece Hall, right?
Which B. Robinson would you take ahead of him?
Right. Well, it's certainly Bijan. I think you're going to see the Bijan get right game. I still think Bijan's not going to live up to his fantasy draft capital. The point is, like, the list is getting long, right? Of running backs. At some point you're really asking, like, DeAndre Swift or Breece Hall, right? You're asking
Walker.
Well, that's, I think, a slam dunk. Josh Jacobs or Breece Hall, right? Probably still going Alvin Kamara over Breece Hall. Jordan Mason right now.
Brian Robinson.
Yeah, Wishman Robinson, James Conner. The point is, like, I think that whatever your list is, there might be even a couple next week. We might add a couple more running backs to that list. And the other thing I think that one of the things, and I'm not really sure how to articulate this exactly, but especially when we spend all offseason studying all this stuff and thinking about it, we conceive of, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think there's a general approach that change happens incrementally, or it happens in a linear fashion. That's not how it actually goes. It's like it's an inflection point, and it all changes all at once, right? Like all at once, we could see, especially now that Aaron Rodgers is, Aaron Rodgers is the GM, he's the quarterback and the offensive coordinator at this point, right? Now, I don't know how Aaron Rodgers feels about Breece Hall, okay? But again, I'd like to say this, and I think this is a good test for people. And assumption of rational coaching can trip us up when we do this. But if you didn't know anything about the players, you didn't know their fantasy ADP, you didn't know their draft status, you didn't know their age, you didn't know anything about them, and you just watch the Jets. I say this almost every week now, Alan. You would say that Allen guy needs to be playing over that Hall guy every week. There hasn't been a week yet where you would watch Breece Hall and say he's clearly better than Allen. So we just might watch the game Monday night, and all of a sudden Braylon Allen is getting 60% of the snaps. Or Breece Hall might have a fumble at the goal line, and then all of a sudden Braylon Allen is in for the next 3 drives. But I mean, it just happens like that. It's not something where you see it coming. It's something that, well, you're on one side of the event, and then you're on the other side of the event. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you said it right. Like this could very quickly devolve. I'll use that word, or evolve if you're Braylon Allen rostering him into the Zach Moss, Chase Brown thing, or if you're lucky, if things go well,
right,
into the Lions running back situation, or going back, a half a decade, if you're really lucky, the Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram thing, right, where they were both top 10 running backs. So the upside is there. I mean, certainly maybe Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler is a better way to do it. So and look where those guys were getting drafted, right? In the 7th to 10th round range.
Right.
So, and then this is not as good of a situation. Also, the Jets' offensive line was not as advertised, right? I mean, there's, if you watch some of Brian Baldinger stuff online, he shows you. Yeah, I mean, it's so cool. Even if you don't love the under the hood stuff, or you just more of just, he actually explains it. That's digestible. That's what I love about him. I don't need to know all the under the hood metrics to understand his stuff. So he shows you that where it's gone wrong. But yeah, back to our conversation for fantasy. You're right. Like, just because Breece Hall has that price tag on, it's almost like you paid a lot of money for Dontavian Wicks on the waiver wire this past week. So you're probably not going to cut him because you have that bias of what you paid, right? Even though he gave you a 0. So with Breece Hall, you spent your first round pick on him, but Aaron Rodgers doesn't care, right?
No.
Like, he goes in there and says, hey, this guy is helping me win more, because that's all he cares about at this point.
Yeah, that's why he keeps throwing to Alan Lazard, like you said, even if the drops or anything like that. So we'll see. But it's going to be a more pass-heavy offense. It should be good for Garrett Wilson, at least. Not that you're going to be able to buy Garrett Wilson after he just got 13 catches or something like that. We'll see. I'm worried that I feel like the Jets and speaking of the Achilles injury quarterback offenses, I feel like the Jets and Falcons maybe are going in the opposite direction, in that Kirk Cousins is looking more comfortable. Kirk Cousins is looking more in alignment with everything around him, and Aaron Rodgers is banged up, looking less comfortable, and we'll see. So I still think that one of at the bottom end of the range of outcomes is catastrophic collapse for the Jets.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Jet fans expect, right? Like,
just to end the season.
Yeah, I mean, there's Jet fans have this everything bad's going to happen to us. Mindset. Whereas there was no, even like the most Jet optimistic people were like, we'll see. Like, we don't like to be this optimistic. But by the way, do you think there's anything to that? Kirk Cousins knows his replacement in the room at this point, right?
Well, I mean, the player I always think back to is DeAngelo Williams. Whenever the Panthers drafted Jonathan Stewart, and DeAngelo Williams was already, they had made a significant investment in him. And even whenever we could go back to Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers had probably his last great season, the season after Jordan Love was drafted.
MVP seasons.
Yeah. So I do. I mean, come on, it's human psychology. The show's called On the Couch. It's human psychology, and I think that just like all of us, facing adversity or facing the prospect of something that we didn't want to happening, what do you do with that? Does it put you on tilt? Does it make your emotions skew everything? Or does you refocus and find something else inside of you? And sure, I could see that happening with Kirk Cousins. And just really quick, since we're on the Kirk Cousins, because we already saw this in the first 2 weeks. When it was the Panthers, I thought, well, it's the Panthers. And that ends up being right. Start everyone against the Panthers. But when it was the Cowboys, I thought, well, this Saints offense might have really found something. They might have really found something with Clint Kubiak, with all. And the thing that's really weird about the Clint Kubiak stuff is he stopped doing the stuff that was working. And the offense became really predictable, and now it's all coming unraveled. Even though, again, a month ago, you thought, could this be one of the NFL's best 3, 4, 5 offenses? So Tampa Bay, they're a Jekyll and Hyde team, and maybe it's just Tampa's pass defense. Maybe it's just a wacky game script. Or do you think, we already mentioned Kyle Pitts, mentioned Bijan Robinson, and then this week it's certainly going to look like Atlanta has really turned it around for good. But do you think they turned it around for good?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. This performance that they had with the 500 yards, Atlanta is the obvious outlier thing. If you're expecting that, if you're expecting, it's.
Right.
I mean, you'd rather have an outlier to this side than to the negative. So, I think that you're going to get what you paid for with your Atlanta Falcons, like with the Drake London types. Kirk Cousins basically was drafted in the QB2 range, dropped, picked up. So he's a good. If you have like Anthony Richardson, you picked up Kirk Cousins, you're happy, right? Like no problem there. The real question is the Kyle Pitts thing, right? Because he's way too good to drop. Hasn't performed, but you have to start him every week unless you picked up Tucker Kraft, who we talked about in the beginning of this. So, yeah, I mean, I think they hit their stride, right? I mean, this was their upside. I mean, this is not a shock. This isn't Houston from last year, or this isn't like Drake May coming in this week and all of a sudden the Patriots are a top 10 offense. This was what was expected. So, yeah, I mean, there's no real actionable info here, other than like you're optimistic that you're hopeful that Bijan will have that breakout game that you mentioned before. Tyler Algier remains rosterable. Yeah. I mean, he should never be dropped. And you just mentioned it before. One of the most underrated strategies in fantasy football is monitoring the drops during these weeks. Yeah. Tyler Algier is a player that could happen to in some leagues. I've seen it happen. Like Ty Chandler this week is going to be dropped for the Minnesota Vikings. So I think that's what you do. This is just an offense you want to collect pieces on. Dude, Darnell Mooney. He's wide receiver. Would you rather have Darnell Mooney or Jalen Waddle for the rest of the season?
Right. Of course, Darnell Mooney. I mean, that's the thing, right?
Of course. That's not of course.
Well, I say that because we're still waiting on Tua Tagovailoa. We're still a couple weeks away from that. And we know that the Dolphins offense starts to get bogged down as the weather gets colder. And who knows about Tagovailoa? I mean, we're kind of out in the wilderness. There's not really a good comparison in terms of a case to say, how many times have we had a player whose concussion history, the name that pops in my head is like Austin Collie, right? And when we had players where the concussion concern is so strong that as soon as they get a concussion, they go on injured reserve.
Yeah, but he's 25 years old. He's not quitting his job. Imagine if someone told you to quit your job when you were 25 years old, Sigmund Bloom.
Right. No, but I mean, even look, I'm going to tell you one of my takes this week. Well, I'll be writing up buy low, sell high tomorrow. Is I think folks should sell Josh Allen, sell low. I mean, sell for 75 cents on the dollar or 60 cents on the dollar right now, because they're hanging him out to dry. They're straight up Go ahead.
Let's figure this out, right? Okay, so when you say sell, do you mean like in like a long-term keeper dynasty format, or like
maybe? I say maybe in the dynasty, certainly in redraft. I was looking. I mean, so here's what I would try to do is, because Jalen Hurts has been a little disappointing, but I think Kellen Moore is actually going to be fine as for the OC merry-go-round for Hurts. I think Moore is going to be good for Hurts, and it was because of the wide receiver injuries that Hurts has somewhat underperformed. But I think so. I would love. I think I just offered someone in one of my leagues, Josh Allen and Deebo Samuel for Jalen Hurts.
Okay, so that's what you need to do. You need to identify someone that has a positional need, package him for a down tier at quarterback, and get that positional need filled in.
Yeah, but to the point though, I mean, what the Bills have done, and the sad thing is, You could flip any one of 4 or 5 plays from the game against the Chiefs in the playoffs last year, and they would have won. And maybe they would have gone on to win the Super Bowl. The Chiefs won the Super Bowl. And then we're not having any of these conversations, okay? But here we are. And I think in hindsight now, it was malpractice. It was malpractice what they did. And when you put Josh Allen and it all got unmasked when Khalil Shakir went out. Because Khalil, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just when you say it's not moral what they did, explain what you're talking about. You're talking about like when they put him back in after the concussion.
Well, that's part of it. Right. So, but we can go back to a quarterback in a Super Bowl window and franchises. And you talk about franchises. I want to go back real quickly to what you said about Jets fans expecting the worst. I mean, I'm a Pittsburgh Pirates fan, okay? But it's interesting to watch that. I know Matt Waldman wrote up the Browns. He's a Browns fan still, because of the things we talk about, like connections in your past and things like that. And I believe he referenced Han, I think it's called, the Korean belief in Korea, like that. It's like something similar in Korean culture, like something bad is going to happen. And that's what's so interesting about Dan Campbell and what he's done for the Lions. And wow, how about the Tigers? I really hope the Tigers can pull off what they're doing right now.
Baseball's fun this year. I know. It's fun this year.
The postseason in baseball this year has been spectacular. Yeah. Francisco Lindor always has a place in my heart now. Alan, he was talking to God. He was talking, folks. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sorry. We'll get back to football here in a second. In that game against the Braves, were you watching that game?
Yeah, of course.
It was one of the greatest 30, 45 minutes of emotional swings in any sport ever that I've ever watched. I feel so lucky that I turned that game on.
You didn't need to be a baseball fan to enjoy that, by the way.
It was scintillating, spine tingling, like literally spine tingling. And, as a Pirates fan, I always have it out for the Braves. Always have it out for the Braves. And just like the Saints and Falcons. And Francisco Lindor, after they came back, and it was after they went up the first time, he was walking through the dugout, talking to God. And then he came up when the Braves had seized control of that game. And it felt like, well, this is it. This is how the Mets season is going to end. And he was the most stoic you will ever see somebody when they hit a home run to save the season.
He knew
something. They all know. They all know. Watch. I've never seen a team in any sport that when they are trailing late as placid as the Mets. It's like they have a deal, not necessarily with the devil, maybe with some sort of Loa from voodoo or something like that, where they just know it's all going to be okay. No matter what happens, it has.
I wonder what the DraftKings odds on Mets World Series are right now.
Oh, what were they when they were 0-5?
Oh,
what were they in May? Because they look unstoppable. The Phillies are the Phillies. I mean, coming into the playoffs, the Phillies look like a team that was out for blood.
The filthy Phillies, yeah.
And Kyle Schwarber hit that home run to start off Game 1 against the Mets. And
7 innings of grind and just yeah,
absolutely. And I'm telling you, just the Mets said, we got this. We still got this. Okay, back to football.
By the way, good usage of the word placid. Yeah, I love it. That's good SAT word right there.
Lake Placid.
Right, that's in upstate New York.
Yeah,
Lake. Yeah.
I was there 1995, the 2-night fish run when we changed it to Lake Acid.
Yeah. Ooh, very good.
That was an incredible weekend. The lake never on all of my fish tour days did a community embrace the fish fans more than Lake Placid did. Everything stayed open for like 72 hours. It was like Las Vegas or something.
The upstate fish shows, for those that
uninitiated.
Fish. Yeah. The only thing, it's better than Madison Square Garden fish shows. They're different vibes, obviously, but the upstate festival thing is a whole different thing.
Yeah.
And I did the rave culture up in Glens Falls, all that stuff,
Yeah. Oh man. See, this is much, football, but so going back to the Josh Allen thing though. So they gave him, he has one guy who can separate in man coverage. And here's the problem. Okay. When you allow teams to play man coverage, they can rush you. They can get after you. You're daring them to get after you. They're going to keep throwing a house at you until you show that you can do something. And unfortunately, in Josh Allen's disposition, he's not going to back down.
Right.
He's not, and he's just going to keep taking these. He took a hit. I wouldn't be surprised, Alan, if he had a concussion against the Ravens. There was a game.
This is like 1978 all over again, right? Like, smell those salts, get back in there again. It's. I know that's not like how
it's terrible.
I know it's bad, but there is another side to this, right? Like, we go, oh my God, this is so terrible. Tua should never play again. But I don't know. Are you a fan of UFC? I'm a big fan of UFC, right? And when a guy gets knocked out, we're like, oh, okay, when's he fighting John Jones, right? Like, we don't say like, oh, his career is over. We just say, okay, when's his next fight? I want to see him get back on it. This is not that much different. So as terrible as it is, these guys know what they're signing up for. And it's like I said, if it's the same thing as fighting sports, right? You get knocked out, you choose to play again. So
sure.
I have empathy, but this is just how it is. It's a gladiator sport.
I just feel like Josh Allen before that hit was playing like a quarterback who was concussed, and I'm just worried. I'm just worried about him because he's not going to do anything for his own good. Listen, I have to step away from for 1 second, but I'm going to set you up this one, and I'll be right back. Is there any? Do you recommend Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Christian McCaffrey? Is there sneaky moves here? Do you try to get one of these guys if you're doing well and their team is not?
Okay. Just the last note on the Buffalo Bills, though, Sigmund Bloom, is that could they be one of the Devontae Adams in on that? I mean, it's very unlikely to happen, but, who needs an alpha wide receiver more than the Buffalo Bills for all the reasons? When Khalil Shakir is the player that you're missing and that the offense can't function without, then you're going to be in the market for an alpha wide receiver, and maybe Amari Cooper is that player. So what I was just saying, Sigmund Bloom, to closing out, I didn't answer your question. I just said that maybe that it's the Buffalo Bills that are in the market for like something that we do in our leagues is we look at the bottom three teams, Cleveland Browns, and Raiders, and so maybe they could be in the Amari Cooper market in a couple weeks, the Buffalo Bills, or they could be in the Devontae Adams market, because when Khalil Shakir is the player that you're missing and your offense won't function without, there's a major hole there. Now, you asked about those injured players. Christian McCaffrey, I call him Christian McCaffrey injury, right? That's dead for this year, right? Like even when before the announcement happened in August, right? It's like I would say to myself, who's going to be on the cover of all the magazines next year? It's not going to be Christian McCaffrey, right? So I don't want to draft. I don't want to try to get the last squeeze out of that like broken down lemon that you try to put into your drink. I want like next year's 101. Christian McCaffrey was never that guy, right? It's so often that whatever happens last year, we try to repeat it. Like, we finally learned our lesson with Kelsey. He wasn't going to be a first round pick this year. So Cooper Kupp, yes, right? When he's coming back, like I don't mind trading for him. Puka Nacua, I'm a little worried about. But McCaffrey, I don't want any part of it.
I hear you. No, and I think that the flip side of that is then try to trade for Jordan Mason. If people were factoring in, Jordan Mason's value is going to drop off a cliff around week 10 or something like that. Maybe not. Because, and it's just sad. I mean, it's so funny. This is where I come in with a take that is so very on the couch. And I think I've mentioned this a few times, maybe once with you too, that, I've been saying that the NFL is the great American novel now, with the great Dickensian kind of scope.
I've heard you say that. That's a really, that stopped me when I listen to you when I ride my bike. That stopped me for a minute. It made me like rewind in my head.
Because everything is in there. Everything that's in American culture, good and bad, and everything in between. The history of the country, so many different things. Capitalism, politics, righting past wrongs, fairness, all kinds of stuff, right? Billionaires and so on, right? Some of the stories we're talking about this week. It's all in there. Everything that happens in the NFL somehow reflects something about America. And I always used to like to say too, in my more optimistic moments, that it's the last outpost of the true American dream. And when you learn the background of some of these players you watch on Sundays and how unlikely, truly unlikely it was, I mean 0.001%, that these players were going to make it out of the situations they were born into. It is stirring, it is transcendent. But the twist now is, I feel like maybe they're like the great Russian novels, and I'm not trying to make a statement accidentally, but that's a whole other thing. That's a real topic there, as America and Russia and the Spider-Man meme, right? But because I feel like
are you saying we might not be the good guys? Because there's something there.
Tune into my new podcast series. We might not be the good guys.
I mean, that's a good title for it, right?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, because I don't want to I know this is a football
podcast. This is the stuff I really want to talk about, right?
Yeah, because
really thinking about. But
when we grew up, right, in the 1990s,
everything was good forever. End of history.
Right, and we were the good guys. Russia was the bad guys. I'm not saying that's not what it is. It's just but it's just this is the good part of the internet, right? More information outside of and this is for fantasy football too. Sure. You're not just getting your fantasy news from, the sportscast news at 11 or ESPN or whatever, and all those great outlets. There's more, individual creators, independent journalists giving us our information, and then we process and come up with our own conclusions, Sigmund Bloom.
Yeah, I think that the change, the positive part of the change is that more people are questioning things, but the vacuum has been filled by, anything that can rush into the vacuum. And unfortunately, the motives of the things that are rushing into that vacuum, as people are feeling like all the institutions, all the things that we believed in, were coming unmoored from all of those, the fall of an empire, right? Then who do you trust? Then what do you trust? And the people who say, trust me, are probably not the people to trust.
Right. Anyone who wants to be president should not be president, right? Or, and add that to any leadership. Right. Yeah. They should be disqualified.
But the Russian novel thing is, I just feel like but you look at these stories and you see that they just seem like they're so grim. Every new detail is more grim. Like Robert Saleh was going to try to fire Nathaniel Hackett, right? Like a mafia story almost. I got to get him before they get me. Either whack or get whacked, right? And then it just reveals, like, in the end, it's just pain. In the end, it's just suffering. In the end, it's just loss. In the end, it's just the worst nature of humans coming out. And that part of the NFL story, because I felt like, you see all of the struggle, and we wait until the end for like one team to raise the trophy, and that's the redemption, right? It was all for something. But for the 31 other teams, what was it for the other fantasy teams? At least we get to do it in a way we don't actually have brain injuries and things like that. Let's see what I got to bring it back now in a very abrupt shift. Speaking of hoisting the trophy, Kareem Hunt, Juju Smith-Schuster, I still think everyone's like, well, I don't know. Do you know? I mean, is this the time during the bye week to yoink these guys off of someone's roster for cheap because they don't realize, like, no, the Chiefs offense is back, and it's back because it's a rerun.
Yeah, it just the Kareem Hunt success, because the week before he shoved Carson Steele out of the way. He's like, "Come on, let's go, get out of here." And then he just solidified that last week, and it just makes you like anyone who took Isaiah Pacheco in the second round. You were right.
Yeah,
but you knew the risk, right? You were driving a car with that's and texting at the same time. Like, you knew that it was a high risk situation. Yeah. Didn't work out, but Kareem Hunt was available. Like, he wasn't a guy people were pushing all the chips in to get. He wasn't 50% on the Sigmund Bloom waiver wire sheet. Like, he was a 15, 20%er. So you could have gotten. And so can he be pried away? It's going to cost you now, right? So maybe this is okay. I believe Kareem Hunt's a top 15 back the rest of the way, and he's going to have weekly upside he's going to be a favorite for a touchdown every week. So maybe this is, if you have Josh Allen, this is where you do your tier down and get Kareem Hunt as that fill-in. So there's a good actionable piece of advice that you gave.
And it's a buy high, okay? And again, I do buy low, sell high every week, but more often I'm doing sell lows and buy highs, because I think that if Kareem Hunt indeed is a top 15 running back the rest of the way, and there's a variable here, is Isaiah Pacheco going to come back? And we already saw with the Rashee Rice thing that the Chiefs are going to be like, well, maybe, we know. Okay, I don't think we're going to see Isaiah Pacheco. And look, at the rate things are going in the AFC West, they're going to have the division clinched by like early December anyway. So they're going to save Isaiah Pacheco for the playoffs. One of the other things, and some of this stuff just gets tucked in so subtly, Alan, you got to be listening closely. Because during that first game, and I thought it was going to be Carson Steele because I wanted it to be Carson Steele. Right. I wanted it to be a fullback / running back.
We remember Peyton Hillis.
Yeah.
that was the coolest season ever when you had Peyton
Yeah.
Hillis on your team. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I wanted it to be a guy with a pet alligator. I live down in New Orleans. There are more alligators than people in Louisiana. My neighbor, my friend Dawson, he grew up here, likes to say, like, if you live in Louisiana, you've been a lot closer to alligators than you ever realized. But they said in the broadcast, go ahead.
I just thought it's because people have reptiles as pets and then they let them out. Is that how it works in Louisiana?
Well, no, we're the pets, right? I mean, Cajuns, crazy Cajuns have like alligators like their buddies, like their friends. I love reptiles, by the way. I had horny toads when I was a kid. I had a ball python. The first time I lived on my own, I was like, I'm on my own. I got a ball python. We have the box turtles. Now we're hybridizing them. We're hybridizing desert box turtles and eastern box turtles in our turtle colony in the back. And I love.
So
lizards.
you were the guy at your house that had the reptiles, right? And you had black light posters. I'm sure of it, right? Black light posters.
I had in college. I might have had one or two. Yeah.
Right. Lava lamps.
I did when I was like probably 11 or 12. I asked for a lava lamp for Christmas.
Right. See, that's what I'm saying. Like there was a Sigmund Bloom. There was a vibe even before you became. Yes. Yeah. So I interrupted your story there about the alligators. Go ahead.
Well, yeah. Well, and the key here was they mentioned because Kareem Hunt looked washed up last year. Right. I mean, for the Cleveland Browns, he looked like a washed up running back. They needed him because Nick Chubb went down. He was serviceable. And then the fact that he wasn't signed anywhere, and even the fact that he was signed to the practice squad, the Chiefs didn't even sign him. They signed him to the practice squad. All this stuff told me like, well, we'll see. They're like, yeah, we'll see if Kareem can help. But then in the broadcast, Alan, they said he played with a sports hernia last year. Oh, that would have been good to know. That would have explained some things. And then all of a sudden, Kareem Hunt looking like Kareem Hunt of old doesn't seem so unlikely.
Yeah, but Kareem Hunt, although the efficiency was low, it was like 3 yards plus a carry. The Browns have less than that now, I think, right? So, like, he was actually 3 times as good as whatever they have now. And also 9 touchdowns for Kareem Hunt last year. Now, I know that's, a little fluky-ish, but that's useful. I mean, I was able to start him and pray, know, as you famously call a what-the-heck flex, right? Like, he was anyone who scores a touchdowns in that category. So, and then putting someone on practice squad seems to be like the normal projection. Like, hey, let's get them up on the playbook. Let's freshen them up. Let's get them a few hits. I mean, Rob Gronkowski famously talks about the game doesn't start for him until he gets hit once, right? So, I mean, the only one that didn't work out for is Dalvin Cook, who's still stuck on the practice squad in Dallas.
Yeah. And I mean, we haven't found out he was playing through an injury. Okay. But yeah, it's amazing. Like there was a point when Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon seemed to be at the exact same place in their career arcs. And then it ended up that they weren't. Real quick, I just want to do the quick lightning round stuff before we go off the rails. Okay, real quick. We mentioned backup running backs and Tyler Algier. Anybody else that comes to mind as a backup running back that you're looking at the waiver wire to say, if this guy gets dropped, if this guy's out there, I'm going to make a spot for him?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one to the guys that would, Blake Corum is out
there,
right?
Thank you. I was teeing it up for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, like,
that's the guy.
I think that you need to make an a very hardcore bid with whatever fab dollars you have. I don't value fab that much, so I'm pushing people out of the way because what odds would I get to say that Kyren Williams is going to miss 2 games this year, right? Yeah. And maybe those 2 games are only in the playoff weeks. Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's a favorite to miss games. And we've already seen now he's already moved up the depth chart, right? He got 6 touches to Ronnie Rivers 0. Corum, it might have taken him a minute to get onto the field. So he's on your waiver wire now, right? I mean, unless you're in the 10 bench league, he might have been held. That's fine. But in you talk to serious players who are playing 5 or 6 bench leagues, he's the guy you need to shove people out of the way to get on your roster this waiver run.
I don't want Kyren Williams to get hurt, but it doesn't seem like Sean McVay learned anything. We thought he did when they drafted Blake Corum, but it doesn't seem like it. And the Rams offense is going to be good. Okay, real quick lightning round. Giants offense, real or 1 week mirage?
Somewhere in between, but real. Right? Real, because if they can finally push Darius Slayton into like a 6 target a game role, that really will help. But that'll become at the expense of Neighbors a little bit. So I think real Danny Dimes will be your quarterback again next year.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, Seattle might have been overlooking them a little bit, but they actually have balance on their offense.
Yeah, good defense too.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Wow. So where we could go? So, I mean, Alan, we
Well,
should
can
just
I
move
have
on.
some for
Go
you
ahead,
if we're going off the
please.
rails.
Please.
Let's.
This is great. Yeah, take the lead. Take the wheel.
All right. So you're doing this, 100 years, right? For fantasy football. Like, what
Mhm.
is the part of the job that you wish that I guess, not what's your favorite part, but what is your least favorite part of this weekly grind of doing fantasy football? And again, you don't need the caveat with I'm grateful I do fantasy football for a living.
Sure,
We know
sure,
that. We love
sure.
hearing you on podcasts. What is the part of this whole thing that is something that you wish was less of nowadays with what the work you do?
Um, I think, like specifically within the context of the job, within the four corners of the job, I think it is having to have a take about everything. You know, so that especially because some of the comprehensive reports that I do, it's just sometimes the take is, well, we don't know yet. You know,
Right, but isn't
sometimes
that a take? Why do you feel pressure to have a take? Because the most disgusting part of social media is these. Hey, this is definitely going to happen. You don't do that, obviously,
no,
but
no.
why do you have to have a take on everything? Why
Well,
can't
that's
you just
fair.
say,
Well, I mean, because sometimes people will say, like, I need to drop one of these two players, or I need to start one of these two players, or I need to know whether or not to make this trade, But I mean, I'm blessed that people don't come for me and they know we're going to be wrong a lot. But outside of the four corners of the job, and this is more like my personal
Mhm.
stuff, it is the wondering, the nagging feeling that I should be doing something else. What my internal compass wanted when I was going to start the revolution, the two dreams were play by play for the Pirates or start the revolution. That now more than ever. And when I was in law school, and they told me the punchline of the big joke and showed me how to use it for myself, it took away my spirit. It took away my idealism, and I thought the game is rigged. I don't want to be a miserable person, so I'm not going to play the game. But now, as I've gotten older, I realize, well, the fact the game's the rig makes it more important that someone's there to fight for the underdog. And I just have this nagging feeling sometimes, like, should I be doing something else? But hey, life's not over yet. There's still other chapters to write.
But I think that you can do both. You just have to
Sure.
change the balance of what you do. I mean, you go pretty hard during these 18 weeks and obviously
Yeah.
more than that. But, I was going to ask you, so what is that other outlet? I know you have your stepson and you have your
Yeah.
family and you have your wife and all that stuff, but what is it that you do when in between to keep your sanity?
Yeah. Live music, and New Orleans is so good for that. Live music is divine. Live music is
So you go to shows.
Yeah, music is the language of the soul. And I just saw something, there's so much. God, one of the weirdest things about the internet now, Alan, is it's so hard to know like what's true and what's not. We're in the post-truth world, right? I saw something like the Chinese character for medicine and music is very close. Like the Chinese character for medicine is based on the character for music. But I do know that music can change your mood. Music
Oh
is
yeah.
it is like medicine in the
An
sense that
endorphin release, right?
yeah, it can all, and live music and actually like the vibrations, actually feeling the vibrations of the music. I mean, it is medicinal, and it's universal. It's one of the other things I think. I mean, I can get more passionate about music than I can about football, really, because I feel that music is so universal, right? Like you can listen to a song in another language, not understand the words, but understand the song and
Right.
get the message.
The lyrics are an instrument. Like when you hear the
Right,
lyrics coming out of
right,
the mouth, it's almost like, oh, that's just another part of the percussion or the rhythm or whatever. So,
right.
do you still drink alcohol? Do you still uh
Barely.
really?
Alcohol never. I mean, when I was in college, I did the college binge drinking thing, because
Yeah,
that's
I
just
mean,
what you do, right? Remember the Onion article? Um,
what was the
Look it
Onion
up.
article? What did it say?
Look it up. Look it up. A study
Okay.
shows binge drinking a blanking, sorry, Joe, blast. Uh, um, but well, see, and look, this is where we really go on the couch, Alan, because I grew up in a household with two alcoholic parents.
Well, you've said that before, and that's why I
Yeah.
asked you. That's one of the
Yeah,
reasons I asked you.
but I'm lucky. I mean, I have an addictive personality. That's part of. I mean, in a lot of ways, that y'all are listening to me right now, and that I'm doing this is because I took an addiction and just turned it into occupation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, and or at the very least escapism, right? Because I mean, isn't that it's the kernel of addictions, anyways? So that helped. That probably helped. I lived above my grandparents' bar when I was like 8 years old. 7 years old, actually. 7 years old. It was I was a mask. Go ahead.
Here, kid, take a drag of this cigarette, right? Like, the 8-year-old coming down to the bar. It's
yeah. Well, it was more like here's a quarter to play the jukebox. And
right.
It was really. I mean, I wish I had kept all the beer lights that we had, like in the back room, and all the 45s.
Oh, those would be worth something. Yeah.
When they would switch out the 45s in the jukebox, we would get the ones that were the old ones that they were taking out. But alcohol is yeah. I mean, I think that am I right, Alan, that there's a little bit of a social trend now? People saying like, yeah, maybe alcohol. Nah.
You're not a little bit right. It's the newer generation is drinking less alcohol. Those numbers are across the board. So that's why they're making drinks like White Claw and High Noon and things like that, because people are out on the, and I'm, we're the same age. I'm 48, going to be 49.
Yeah.
And it's starting to make I'm not enjoying it the same way.
Yeah.
And it's not making me feel the same way after. Like, I definitely, it doesn't, like, when I say affect my work, it just makes my work harder. I have to give more effort to get to where I want to be. So
yeah, well, back in the day, sorry, go ahead and finish your thought.
No, that was it. I was curious where you are in that, because you're still putting out such prolific work. It almost like it struck me as that you're probably in just a different zone with that at this point.
No, I there are other things that I consume to make the chattering in my head go away, or otherwise
those are enhancing
myself, right, for some rest sometimes. For some respite from the day. It means when it means the day's over and it's time to relax. No, I was going to say back when I was at Syracuse, and I took a class called Drugs and Human Behavior. It was a very hotly vied for class. It was hard to get spots in. And the professor's name was Tibor Palfai. So always remember this class. Tremendous class. And it was a class that basically just told the truth about drugs and their effects on human behavior and the body. I mean, it was just science, And alcohol was the one drug that he isolated as it is deleterious for every system of your body. Every single system of your body is harmed by alcohol consumption. And the other thing I remember from that class when I bring it up is most of the way that and there's a whole other thing here too about altering our consciousness. I mean, that's as much a need as water and food. Like when we were a kid and we spun around till we got dizzy and things like that, But most of these substances that we consume to alter our consciousness, we discovered by watching animals. I think alcohol was like elephants knocking over silos. There was stuff fermenting in there, right? I think reindeer with psilocybin mushrooms, it was reindeer. Watching reindeer like frolic after they would eat these mushrooms, like, maybe I should eat that and see what happens. Humans and our curiosity.
I got you.
We're animals.
Watching, yes.
We watched animals. We watched what they did, and we thought, maybe there's something to that.
Right. Even the eating of, eating like the indigenous eating peyote or whatever it is. I mean, it's it's so crazy because it's like, I don't know, and especially with alcohol, like you're always chasing, and then it only gets worse as you consume more. I don't know. I've never had that sort of inflection point about it, so I was curious where you were.
I'm down here in New Orleans, where like it makes everything go. I mean,
hand grenades, hurricanes, all that stuff,
all of it. Yeah. So wow. See, I wish we should just do like another 3 or 4 hours. Really, should just talk about the classes we took in college. But this is awesome. Thanks. It is a great joy for all of you out there to give me the opportunity to do this, so I can hang out with people like Alan and we can call it work, and we're there for you always along in the journey. If you're not into baseball, check out the baseball playoffs. Emotional swings and intensity this year. They had to get extra security in San Diego because the Dodgers Padres thing is like going into the red. It's going to be amazing, just like the rest of this football season. And we're going to get you through always. We love doing this journey with you because you are so classy.